Where's the ATM card? Let me handle it, Donald said to me as I battled cancer and endured a hospital stay. His triumphant smirk hinted at sinister intentions now that he possessed the ATM card. Just so you know, there's $500,000 in there. Handle it well, I informed him, trusting him not just as my husband but also as a part of my carefully laid plan. I disclosed the ATM card's location, aware of the risks but determined to turn the tables. When I returned home hoping to retrieve some belongings, I found a divorce application on the table, confirming my suspicions. The ATM card was gone, the operation successful. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a hopeless situation, but for me, it was just the beginning of my revenge. I'm Emily, a housewife in my 40s. Initially, Donald and I had a problem-free marriage, but it all soared due to Donald's true nature. A deception that started 2 months into our marriage. He masqueraded as a kind, caring husband but revealed a belief that a wife must always prioritize her husband, underpinning his terrible personality. Donald constantly subjected me to harsh words, believing a wife should be subordinate. You should always listen to what your husband says, was his mantra. Failure to fulfill his whims would prompt cruel remarks like, "Aren't you capable of listening to your husband? You're a failure as a wife." His demands extended to household chores, insisting on washing his clothes separately and having his room cleaned first, no matter how unreasonable. Even meals were subject to his unpredictable moods. "A wife's job is to serve what her husband wants to eat," he'd say, rejecting even his favorite dishes if they didn't suit his fancy. It was unreasonable, yes. I am Donald's wife, but that doesn't make me omniscient or capable of reading his mind. If he didn't want to eat something because he wasn't in the mood, he could have simply told me beforehand what he wanted. But Donald never did that, making it increasingly difficult to cater to his whims. I was honestly fed up with his childlike tantrums. It became unbearable. Yet I knew I couldn't ignore his demands completely because each mistake I made worsened the atmosphere at home and further deteriorated our relationship. Living under such forced conditions was taking its toll. While doing household chores, I lost consciousness, collapsing with a loud noise that alerted a concerned neighbor. They contacted the building manager, who found me and called an ambulance. Taken to the hospital and regaining consciousness, I was immediately admitted for tests. My wishful thinking, hoping they wouldn't find anything wrong, was shattered when I was diagnosed with cancer. Whether it was caused by stress or not, I experienced severe dizziness that left me unable to stand. A nurse had to support me as I sat down suddenly. The doctor advised me to contact family members. I tried reaching out to my parents' home, but my mother had passed away a few years ago, and my father needed care, living with my brother and his wife 3 hours away by plane. It was impossible for them to come quickly. I called Donald, but only reached his voicemail. Leaving a message, I realized he had turned off notifications for messages from me, likely meaning he wouldn't notice it promptly. I could have gone to retrieve my belongings myself, but the doctor advised against it, so I reluctantly gave up on that idea. Hours later, Donald finally contacted me with a brief message. "I'll come to the hospital tomorrow. Wait for me." His message lacked any concern for my condition, leaving me uncertain if he would even bring my necessities. His indifference felt like a heavy burden. Earlier, I had explicitly asked Donald to bring my belongings that day. I urgently needed a change of clothes and toiletries left at home. Despite my repeated messages, there was no response. After hours of distress, Donald finally read my messages and bluntly replied, "Shut up and be quiet." Considering my urgent need due to being hospitalized for cancer, his response was shockingly disappointing. Honestly, I hadn't expected much from Donald to begin with. True to form, he didn't show up at the hospital that day. I tried to be realistic, but a part of me couldn't let go of hope, making my first day in the hospital even more difficult. The nurses sympathized with me, which only added to my emotional pain. The next day around noon, just as promised, Donald showed up. Casually, he remarked, "You look healthier than I thought. I expected you to be more frail." His comment infuriated me. "Just put down the bags and leave," I said angrily. Tilting his head, Donald responded, "What bags?" My frustration boiled over. Wasn't he supposed to bring my things? Unable to contain my anger, I glared at him. "What's that look for?" He snapped back, clearly annoyed. His unreasonable behavior pushed me to my limit, but I tried to stay calm. "Then why are you here if you didn't bring my things?" "There's no point." "I had another errand," Donald replied in a confused tone to my angry question. "Another errand? What is it? I pressed impatiently, exhausted from anxiety and sleep deprivation. Donald hesitated, as if debating whether to say something. If you have something to say it now, I urged him. Finally, with a laugh, Donald revealed his true intention. Where's the ATM card? Let me manage it. Trust me. His request suddenly made sense. He had come to take control of the ATM card, aiming to seize our savings for his own use. His self-centeredness, even in this situation, left me sighing deeply. Yet Donald appeared unfazed, smiling as if nothing else mattered. Unable to tolerate his behavior any longer, I decided to act. There's $500,000. Please take care of it, I told him firmly. Donald's reaction was a mix of surprise and delight. To provide context, both Donald and I had been ordinary office workers before marriage, never earning a fortune. So where did this wealth come from? The answer: stocks. I had started investing after becoming the housewife following a friend's suggestion. While managing household responsibilities, I recently made a significant profit in the stock market. Initially intending to keep this $500,000 secret, fearing Donald's selfish actions if he knew about it, my desire for revenge drove me to reveal its existence. Donald's reaction to the unexpectedly large amount confirmed my suspicions. Smiling gently at him, I said, "The ATM card is in the third drawer of the shelf. You'll manage it, right?" Donald seemed dumbstruck but quickly regained his composure. "Understood," he replied energetically. It appeared he had fallen perfectly into the trap. "I'll leave the rest to you," I said as he briskly left the room. Unaware of the obvious trap, Donald seemed convinced everything was going according to his plan. However, withdrawing such a large sum wouldn't be easy. Fortunately, it was a holiday, and the bank's counters were closed. Donald, occupied with work the next day, wouldn't likely withdraw the money until the evening, giving me enough time to execute my revenge plan after discussing it with my doctor. I was granted permission to leave the hospital briefly, and tomorrow my revenge would unfold. Unable to wait until then, I decided to return home to retrieve my belongings. This was merely a pretext. My real goal lay elsewhere. Despite missing home dearly even for just a day, I knew Donald would be at work, leaving the house empty. Upon entering, I spotted two papers on the living room table, a divorce application and a hastily written letter. "Sorry for the rush, but let's get divorced. Please write and submit the divorce application," the letter read. With caution, I checked the shelf and confirmed my suspicion. The ATM card was gone. Donald had taken it. Ordinarily, one might feel dismayed at such a significant sum being stolen, but I couldn't help but smile. "Operation successful" slipped out of my lips. If Donald had been present, he would have been furious, wondering what I meant. First, I filled out the divorce application. Then, I gathered the essentials needed for my hospital stay and left the house we had shared for so many years. Of course, I submitted the divorce application on my way out, severing all ties with him. Back at the hospital, I prepared for the challenges ahead, discussing various matters with my doctor. Later, while relaxing in my hospital room, I noticed several missed calls on my phone, all from Donald. He had also sent messages asking how to withdraw the money or something similar. Not wanting to disturb my roommate, I moved to the common area where phone calls were allowed and returned Emily's call. "Finally, I can't withdraw the money. Please tell me how to do it." Donald's voice sounded more frantic than I had imagined. Clearly, he needed the $500,000 immediately for some urgent reason, but I felt no obligation to help him. "If you can't withdraw it, just give up," I replied coldly, my distress evident in my tone. "Don't be so harsh. We were husband and wife after all. Maybe we should help each other out," Donald pleaded. "What nonsense about being husband and wife about helping each other," I retorted sharply. Donald's actions betrayed nothing noble. He was driven purely by greed. There was no way I would entertain Donald's appeal to sentiment. "Are you having trouble withdrawing the money?" I asked, trying to maintain some semblance of detachment. "Yes, I urgently need the $500,000. Please help me." Donald's voice trembled with desperation. It was the weakest I had ever heard him. The thought of Donald being so cornered almost made me laugh, but I decided to confront him with the harsh reality. "The method is correct, but the ATM card you have now won't work anymore," I stated bluntly. Donald's voice rose in disbelief. "What do you mean? Normally, an ATM card should work." "It's true, an ATM card should work, but the one you have is now useless," I informed him firmly. "Why?" Because I filed a theft report earlier today. That ATM card is just a piece of paper now, useless to you, I declared calmly. Silence followed on Donald's end, likely shock settling in. Earlier that day, I had stopped by the bank and reported the card stolen. Donald had taken my ATM card without permission, intending to claim the $500,000 I had earned for himself. His actions were clear theft, and filing a report was the right course of action. The ATM card he had could no longer access the funds. Moreover, our marriage was over, removing any claim he might have had as a spouse. How does it feel to be tricked by the woman you looked down upon? I couldn't help but add with a hint of satisfaction. I don't know what you wanted the $500,000 for, but I'm not foolish enough to hand over such an amount under these circumstances, I continued firmly, exhausted by his pleas. I need the $500,000 right now. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the money, Donald pleaded desperately. His urgency was palpable, but I couldn't fathom why he suddenly needed such a large sum. Why do you suddenly need $500,000? What have you done? I asked, the ominous silence hanging heavy as I awaited his response. Donald began to explain. 2 days ago, upon learning about the $500,000, he impulsively quit his job, expecting a windfall. He spent a large portion on gambling, accumulating a debt of $300,000. Now, lenders were demanding repayment within a week, or his future was uncertain. Donald believed he could resolve everything with the ATM card linked to the $500,000. He continued living lavishly, assuming the funds were his. However, when he attempted to withdraw the money that evening, he discovered the card was useless. Now, without the $500,000, my future is uncertain, Donald admitted, his desperation evident. He had abandoned the divorce papers and shamelessly contacted me for help. I don't know what will happen if this continues. Donald's voice trembled with panic, and it seemed there was no falsehood in his story. His reckless actions elicited a deep sigh from me. Donald had done the unthinkable. Seduced by the allure of a large sum of money, he had recklessly spent $300,000 in just a few days. The old me, who had once tolerated his terrible behavior and modestly lived with Donald, might have extended a helping hand. But now I was a different person. There was no love left for Donald, and no matter how much he begged, I felt no pity, only a faint amusement that he thought I would care. Still, Donald hadn't given up. Please help me, you're the only one I have left, he pleaded desperately. His appeals grated on my nerves. I want to rid myself of this nuisance and focus on my treatment. This was a situation of Donald's own making. If he had shown concern for me as a husband and brought my things on the day I asked, I might have considered sharing some of the $500,000 with him, but he had chosen otherwise. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of giving you the $500,000 or helping you. It's your own responsibility, I replied firmly, my tone unyielding and harsh. After all this time of not behaving like a husband, it's cowardly to ask for help now just because we're technically still married. Don't be so cruel. We were married, after all. Our long relationship doesn't just disappear with a divorce paper. Donald tried to appeal to her past. What relationship? I retorted sharply. You've only leaned on me. You're making excuses to manipulate the situation in your favor. I refuse to waste another minute on him. I will not give you the $500,000, no matter what you say. Donald's desperation escalated. Please, Emily, I'm begging you. You're the only one I can turn to. If you abandon me, I don't know what will happen to me. Donald's tone implied blame directed at me for his predicament. But it was Donald's reckless spending that had brought him to this point. If only he hadn't splurged so carelessly, he wouldn't be facing such a dire future. If he hadn't cut me off thinking he had access to money, none of this would have happened. Stop making excuses. You're facing the consequences of your own actions. Handle it yourself, I told him firmly before ending the call. Ignoring several subsequent calls from Donald, I blocked his contact to ensure no further communication. With the divorce papers filed and submitted, Donald and I were officially strangers. Embracing my newfound freedom, I focused on battling cancer, which after a long struggle, I finally overcame. Upon discharge from the hospital, I learned from a friend that Donald's whereabouts had become unknown. Desperate after losing contact with me, he had tried to borrow money from his in-laws and friends. However, his urgent request for $300,000 raised suspicions, and no one lent him a penny. Donald's fate remained a mystery to me, but it was clear he was enduring more suffering than he could have imagined. A sense of deep satisfaction washed over me. Post-cancer, I moved out of the house I had shared with Donald, found a new home, and began working from home, relishing my independence. Thankfully, my finances were secure. Occasionally asked by friends if I would find new love, memories of my tumultuous life with Donald discouraged any thoughts of remarriage. I preferred the freedom of living alone.
Why did someone get buried in the garden? I quickly covered my daughter's mouth as she blurted out the question. It was supposed to be a happy day celebrating our new house. I worried Ruby, the host, might react badly if my daughter embarrassed her. My brother had warned me about Ruby's temper. Thankfully, I managed to smooth things over. Later, as we were leaving, I found my daughter chatting with something by the flower bed. Suddenly, Ruby swung a bat at her. "Sarah," I cried out, reaching for her. "My name is Avon. I'm 35, and I live with my 5-year-old daughter, Sarah. My husband works away, so we see him rarely. It gets lonely without him. Thankfully, my parents live close by, just a 5-minute drive away. We visit them often, but sometimes there are issues when we go over." "Yvonne, there's a problem again?" "You're here so often, Yvonne. Isn't that too much? It's pointless for you to stay married." Those sharp words were from Ruby, my sister-in-law. My parents, along with my older brother Eugene and his wife Ruby, were living together temporarily. Eugene was building a new house, so they stayed with our parents until it was ready. "Even if your husband's away, are you relying on your parents too much?" Ruby, a year older than me, wasn't necessarily mean, but she was assertive and a bit snarky. I've never liked her, not since she started dating my brother. I still don't get what he sees in her. I never understood why she was so tough on me, her sister-in-law. Plus, she didn't seem to enjoy kids, especially my daughter. "Grandma, let's play," Sarah said, pulling my mother's hand excitedly. Ruby made a clearly annoyed face. It's exhausting when Sarah's here. She's so noisy. "Yvonne, you really need to discipline her more. It'll create problems later on." Those comments always made me uneasy. I'd only visited because Sarah wanted to see her grandparents, but Ruby's remarks always gave me a headache. The second issue was about my daughter Sarah. She has a strange ability to see things others can't and sense certain things. At first, we didn't believe it, but after she accurately found lost items and other eerie incidents, we started to accept it. It was a family secret we kept hidden. I never thought it would come out like this. Finally, the long cohabitation was ending. My brother and his wife's new house was ready, and they were moving out soon. I was looking forward to it. Living together had been tough. Ruby whispered to me, and I could only manage a weak smile. It wasn't just hard for her. I was relieved our parents' home would finally be peaceful. My daughter looked at me curiously. "Mom, why do you act differently around Ruby? You're more relaxed with Grandma and Eugene." "Well, you see, Eugene and I grew up together, but Ruby only recently joined our family through marriage." My daughter seemed unsure. "Sorry, was that confusing?" "No, I understand, but it's sad." "Sad?" I asked, puzzled. Sarah nodded. "It's sad that we finally became a family, and now we're going to be separated again soon." When Sarah speaks like that, it's oddly convincing. Separated. Could it be that Eugene and his wife are getting divorced? While it would be a relief for me, I feel bad for Eugene if he's upset. So they just finished building their new house, and now the idea of them divorcing so soon is hard to grasp. I couldn't understand it, so I simply asked Sarah to promise not to talk about it elsewhere and decided not to think about it too much. Sometime after Eugene and his wife moved, we got an invitation to their housewarming party. We wrapped a nice gift of money, and the 5 of us, including my parents, Sarah, and me, went over. Eugene's house was about a 20-minute drive from our parents' place. Since my small car couldn't fit all 5 of us, we had to use my father's car. It was an old manual transmission, which made me nervous, but my father is a safer driver than I am, so it should be fine. "It's pretty impressive to me that you can drive a stick shift," I said to him. When we arrived, I was immediately struck by the beauty of the place. It was a brand new build indeed. The exterior alone was impressive. The yard was spacious, and there was even a new flower bed near the bay window. There weren't any flowers yet, just soil, but it was still impressive. "Wow, it's so big," Sarah exclaimed, running around the yard with joy. "Hey, Sarah," I called out, trying to catch up to her, but Eugene stopped me. "Let her play. It's okay if she wants to enjoy the big yard." "Oh, thank you," I replied, trusting Eugene's judgment. I kept an eye on Sarah to make sure she stayed safe. While she stayed in the yard, Sarah wouldn't get lost or bother anyone. I found myself daydreaming about having a house of our own when Ruby came over, loudly reprimanding us from a distance. "Hey, Yvonne, you should be keeping a closer eye on Sarah." "Oh, did she do something?" Sarah had been playing around, but she hadn't caused any trouble. I couldn't recall anything that would upset Ruby, but she seemed angry. Is it normal to let kids run wild at a housewarming? It's quite disruptive, don't you think? "I'm sorry, Eugene said it was fine, so I thought it was okay." That's just Eugene being too polite to say anything. Don't take it personally. I couldn't afford to upset Ruby further. I had seen Eugene endure Ruby's outbursts many times before. "I apologize. I'll make sure she behaves." I went after Sarah, who had just dashed past me. As I approached, I found her crouched by the flower bed, staring intently. All she could see was dirt. No flowers had bloomed yet. "What's so fascinating, Sarah? What are you doing?" When I asked from above, my daughter looked up and said, "Why is there a person buried in the garden?" "What?" After a moment to process her words, I instinctively covered my daughter's mouth. Of all things, she had to say that here during my brother and his wife's housewarming. It was meant to be a joyous occasion, but if Sarah said something inappropriate, it could cause trouble. Ruby had a temper, as my brother had warned me. It seemed my brother had heard, but fortunately, Ruby was engrossed in conversation with Mom and hadn't noticed. "Look, Sarah, what a lovely house. Isn't it beautiful? Let's go inside." I caught my brother's eye, his expression mixed, and tried to distract my daughter as we moved. I kept my hand over her mouth, but Sarah squirmed free and said, "Mom, it's strange. Why aren't we helping the person buried in the garden?" "Sarah, it's okay. I'll talk to Eugene." Sarah slipped away and ran to my brother, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the flower bed. Seeing the look on my brother's face, who knows? Sarah's determination spoke volumes. "Sarah, do you see something by the flower bed?" Sarah looks up at my brother, tilting her head. "Yeah, Eugene, can't you see? We need to help them quickly. They're calling for Ruby, asking for her." This caught both my brother and me off guard, and we exchanged surprised glances. Ruby was still engrossed in conversation with Mom. Ruby's name? Right here. My brother and I approached the flower bed. Upon closer inspection, the soil Sarah pointed to had a slightly different color, as if it had been disturbed before. A shiver ran down my spine as a chilling thought crossed my mind. What should we do, Eugene? We can't just ignore what Sarah said. Not because she's a child, but because it's Sarah. My brother fetched a small gardening spade from the back of the house. It seemed inadequate for digging, but it was all we had. When we tapped the soil, it felt unnaturally hard, as if something had been compacted to conceal it. My brother, perhaps frightened, was cautious and couldn't apply much force with the spade. Impatiently, Sarah grabbed the spade from him. "Eugene, you're not good at this. Let me do it." "Sarah, wait," I said, reaching out to stop her. But Ruby grabbed Sarah's wrist before I could react. Ruby had approached unnoticed and squatted down to Sarah's level, smiling brightly. "Hey, Sarah, don't touch my special flower garden." Relieved at Ruby's cheerful demeanor, I pulled Sarah closer. "That's right, Sarah. You can't touch things without permission. Sorry, Ruby." "No problem, but don't touch it again. Ever." I sensed an unusual intensity in Ruby's demeanor. I lowered my head again, attempting to escape to my mother, Yvonne, with Sarah in tow. But Sarah pointed at the flower bed once more and exclaimed, Look, that person is watching Ruby over there. Sarah, you might scare Ruby with that talk. Please don't say such things. Whenever Sarah said something like this before, it left people pale and trembling. I imagined Ruby must be terrified to hear such things about our new home. Apologies, Ruby. It's just a misunderstanding by Sarah. I tried to make amends, glancing at Ruby's face. Despite any dislike I harbored for her, I felt sorry for frightening her. I thought I needed my brother Eugene to smooth things over, but Ruby's expression caught my breath. Instead of fear, her eyes were wide with anger. Sarah, is someone really watching me? Yes, and they're asking for your help, Sarah replied. Ruby simply scoffed and smirked, but her eyes betrayed no amusement. For some reason, Ruby's expression filled me with dread, and I shivered. I'm sorry, Ruby. It's fine. Just kids being kids, Ruby dismissed, though her tone lacked warmth. Eugene swiftly intervened between me and Ruby, diffusing the tension for the moment. We entered the new house with our parents and settled onto the plush new couch. Wow, it's so comfy, Sarah exclaimed. Her spirits lifted in the new surroundings as she sank into the couch happily. It seemed she had completely forgotten the earlier incident, and I felt relieved. We ordered some sushi for takeout, chatting, and enjoying the meal. Sarah must have been tired from all the excitement because before long, she had fallen asleep on the couch. Would you like to take her upstairs to bed? Should Eugene carry her? Really? Thank you. That would be helpful. We still have some time before we head back. It might be better than her sleeping in the busy living room. Initially, I thought so too, but then I had a bad feeling. I think it's fine. She might feel lonely waking up alone. Oh, she's already 5, isn't she? She'll be fine. She can sleep here. Yvonne, you're a bit overprotective, aren't you? Ruby murmured, smoothly returning to the conversation with my brother and parents. Despite the brief exchange, I couldn't stop sweating. After a while, Sarah woke up. It's almost time to leave. We agreed with our dad and started preparing to go home. As I cleaned up the table and washed the cups, my daughter tugged on my clothes. Hey, Mom, are we leaving now? Just a little longer, okay? We'll be leaving soon. You're being impatient. Maybe it was because she had just woken up, but Sarah seemed a bit cranky. I didn't want to deal with a tantrum right now, so I decided to ask my mother for help. Mom, could you please rinse these? Sarah is getting grumpy. My mother hurried over, but Ruby blocked her. Then how about Sarah and I play in the yard while we wait? In the yard? Let's do that. My daughter lit up at the idea of going outside. More than that, I was surprised that Ruby invited her to play. She wasn't known to be fond of children, so I was puzzled but grateful. Thank you, Ruby, but we're getting ready to head home. It's just until you leave. It's fine. Come on, Sarah, let's go. Yeah. Sarah cheerfully replied, taking Ruby's hand as they left. It's odd. Ruby isn't usually interested in children, Eugene remarked, watching them go with a puzzled expression. I know, right? Sarah and Ruby have met many times, but I've never seen them play together. Sarah isn't shy around strangers and would happily approach Ruby, but I always thought Ruby kept her distance. Yet today, Ruby was the one who initiated. Something felt off. I'm going outside too, I announced, rushing out in a hurry. Sarah was squatting in front of the flower bed, engaged in conversation. Ruby was nowhere to be seen. Intrigued, I slowed my pace and hurried over to her. Then, in the next moment, I witnessed Ruby swinging a baseball bat at Sarah's head with all her strength. It was a terrifying moment. I grabbed my daughter's arm, and we both stumbled backward. A metallic clang reverberated through the yard as the bat struck where Sarah had been just moments before. Eugene and my parents rushed outside upon hearing the noise. What was that, Ruby? Eugene, shocked at the sight of Ruby holding the bat, inquired. My heart raced as I held Sarah tightly. It had been too close. If I had been a moment later, Sarah could have. I couldn't even bring myself to think about it. I glanced up at Ruby, her expression a mix of anger and perhaps indifference. What happened? Eugene asked suspiciously. Ruby, did you try to hit Sarah with the bat? I can't believe it. Eugene approached Ruby in disbelief. Is it true, Ruby? Why would you? Ruby simply smirked. Come on, Yvonne, it was just a joke. Anger surged within me, and I retorted, a joke? Are you serious? If that had hit her, do you realize what could have happened? It wouldn't have been a mere injury. As I spoke, I noticed something horrific. The end of the baseball bat was stained with something dark red. Catching my gaze, Ruby exhaled. Sarah started it, didn't she? She shouldn't have said what she did. My eyes were drawn involuntarily to the flower bed. Could it be true? Was there really someone buried beneath, as my daughter had claimed? Fear gripped me, making my teeth chatter. My brother, concerned, kept me and Sarah away from Ruby. What's going on, Ruby? It's nothing serious, just a joke. Maybe I went too far. My brother gazed at Ruby for a moment, then decisively went to the back of the yard. He grabbed a small shovel and started digging up the flower beds Sarah had pointed out earlier. Hey, Eugene, what are you doing? Ruby tried to intervene, but she couldn't stop my brother. He kept digging until he unearthed something, leaving him speechless and clutching his head. Ruby collapsed weakly beside him. Eugene, Yvonne, call the police, he said urgently. Quickly take Sarah and go home. From my brother's unusual behavior, I realized Sarah's words were true. He had found something Sarah had mentioned. I immediately dialed the police. Surprisingly, Ruby remained subdued until the police arrived. She repeated, "It's all over," as if in a daze, but she didn't become furious or try to escape. Once the police arrived, I decided to stay with my brother while leaving my daughter with my parents. My mother was too frightened to accompany us, and although my father offered to stay, we would then be without a driver. I'll be fine alone, I insisted, though it wasn't entirely true. I couldn't leave my brother by himself. Sarah, listen to Grandma and Grandpa and wait here, okay? Okay, Mommy. Take care of Eugene too. Of course. I couldn't gauge how much my daughter understood, but I reassured her with a smile. My brother appeared to be conversing calmly with the officer. I observed from a corner of the yard so as not to interfere. Suddenly, Ruby's voice erupted in anger. I've already told you, I don't know anything. Fine, let's go to the station and I'll explain everything there. You're just trying to blame me? I won't go. The officer looked puzzled by Ruby's outburst. A female officer attempted to grab Ruby's arm, but she shook her off and sought refuge behind my brother. Eugene, help me. My brother, visibly flustered, held Ruby's shoulder but remained conflicted, neither embracing her nor pushing her away. I didn't do anything wrong. It's a false accusation. Though my brother may have wanted to believe Ruby, her recent actions, like swinging a baseball bat at Sarah, suggested otherwise. Is someone watching me? Yeah, they're asking for Ruby's help. Ruby's response was a cynical ha, with no trace of a smile in her eyes. Her demeanor sent a chill down my spine, and I shuddered. I'm sorry, Ruby. It's okay. It's just kid stuff. Eugene quickly intervened between me and Ruby, momentarily diffusing the tension. We retreated into the new house with our parents, settling onto the plush couch. Wow, it's so comfy. Sarah's mood seemed to brighten in the new surroundings as she happily sank into the couch. She appeared to have forgotten the earlier incident, bringing a sense of relief. We ordered some takeout sushi, engaging in light conversation while eating. Sarah must have been exhausted from all the excitement, as she soon drifted off to sleep on the couch. Would you like to put her to bed upstairs? Should Eugene carry her? Really? Thank you. That would be helpful. We still have some time before we head back. It might be better than her sleeping in the busy living room. Initially, I thought so too. But then I had a bad feeling. I think it's fine. She might feel lonely waking up alone. Oh, she's already 5, isn't she? She'll be fine. She can sleep here. Yvonne, you're a bit overprotective, aren't you? Ruby murmured, seamlessly rejoining the conversation with my brother and parents. Despite the brief exchange, I couldn't shake off my nervousness. Soon after, Sarah woke up. It's time to leave. We agreed with our dad and began preparing to head home. As I tidied up the table and washed the cups, Sarah tugged on my clothes. "Mom, are we leaving yet?" "Just a little longer, okay? We'll be leaving soon. You're being a bit impatient." Sarah seemed a bit cranky, perhaps due to just waking up. Not wanting to deal with a potential tantrum, I asked my mother for help. "Mom, could you please rinse these?" Sarah is getting a bit grumpy. My mother hurried over, but Ruby blocked her. "How about Sarah and I play in the yard while we wait?" "In the yard? Yes, let's do that." Sarah was thrilled at the idea of going outside. I was surprised that Ruby invited her to play. "Thank you, Ruby, but we're getting ready to head home. It's just until you leave." "It's fine. Come on, let's go, Sarah." "Yeah," Sarah cheerfully replied, taking Ruby's hand, and they left. "It's odd. Ruby isn't usually fond of children," Eugene remarked, watching them go with a stunned expression. "I agree. Ruby and my daughter have met many times, but I've never seen them play together." Sarah isn't shy with strangers and would happily approach Ruby, but I always thought Ruby kept her distance. Yet today, Ruby was the one who initiated. Something didn't feel right to me. I decided to go outside too. I rushed out hurriedly. Sarah was squatting in front of the flower bed, engaged in conversation. Ruby was nowhere to be seen. Intrigued, I slowed my pace and ran over to her. Then, in the next moment, I witnessed Ruby swinging a baseball bat at Sarah's head with all her might. It was a terrifying moment. I grabbed my daughter's arm, and we both stumbled backward. A metallic clang reverberated through the yard as the bat struck where Sarah had been just moments before.